Harry, let's dive into kind of negating or answering this question of, the myth, I can do this alone. Why can't we do recovery alone? Why aren't we capable of that kind of process?
Boy, that you're right, Nick. That is a huge piece that we're only going to skim over today
Huh.
to get to this, but
Yeah.
it's we want to talk about something called implicit memories. Implicit memories come from the limbic system. You are not consciously aware of them. There is a belief system in the deep limbic system that exists separate from your conscious brain. So when Paul says in Romans 7:15, I find the members of my body doing the very thing I don't want to do, is actually the limbic system in a time of difficulty or stress taking over the brain and taking you to old coping strategies that you developed when you were very young. 90% of our personalities were formed in the first 7 years of our lives. And if this was a 4 hour session, I could give you a great background story of my life that actually goes to 20 years before I was born that had direct, powerful influence on my very existence when I was born, and how that has influenced me in portions of my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
So the it says in 1 Corinthians 13 verse 12, a portion of that scripture says, "We see dimly." Well, Nick and Trevor, there's times where we can be pretty full of ourselves and thinking we're thinking pretty clearly.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing pretty clearly, but what we're not seeing is the backstory influences that influence our lives. We have blind spots, and we have people in our healing community who love us enough to expose those blind spots to ourselves. And so this is at the very core about the renewing of the mind, but the renewing of the mind is not merely the renewing of the conscious brain. It's renewing of the whole smorgasbord of the conscious and the unconscious parts of our life. This is you remember that the limbic system scientifically, from a biblical point of view, is what Scripture in Old and New Testament call our hearts. So our heart influences in ways that we don't always recognize. We're not able to even see at times. So we need people in our life to to ask two things that create the environment that allows a community to thrive. Being a good listener is people asking me or asking you clarifying questions. And secondly, being able to express empathy for our circumstances. It doesn't justify or minimize the sin in our life, but it lets us know that contrary to what shame tells us, we're not alone. There are people who know our story and they still care about us.
Yeah.
They still love us.
Yeah.
They're still willing to invest in us.
Yeah, this cycle of addiction, isolation. So shame can breed isolation. Isolation can breed more fear, and then fear can just perpetuate the cycle over and over. Those three play really, really well together. And the more that we go into that, the less we want to reach out. And so I think that the only way that we can get out of that is by letting other people in, is then addressing the fact that, yeah, I am afraid of relationships. We say it often here. We're wounded in relationship and healed in relationship. And so, which I know we'll get into, but it's just the only way to break out of that is to invite someone else in. The biblical language is like, really, it's shining the light. It's not in the dark anymore. You bring these things out into the light, and that's when it can be addressed, and can be addressed in relationship. And one of the things that I've been chewing on probably for months now is just that idea that God's vertical love is experienced horizontally in our relationships, and that they are a conduit. Our relationships are a conduit for God's love and his mercy and his discipline to come out. And it's not the only place, but that is a primary place that God's built us for. And if that's true, if we're not in community and relationship, then we're missing out on all of those things that we need to be healthy followers of Jesus and healthy people.
Yeah. Well, and believing that we can do it alone is kind of making an assumption that the only problem to change here is the behavior, that the bad behavior needs to stop, when really the isolation, the secrecy, and the shame are just as much a part of the problem. They're like the glue that holds it all together. And so if we only are attempting to stop or change the bad behavior, but haven't broken out of isolation, secrecy, and shame, either that bad behavior or addictive behavior is going to come back, or something new is going to develop, because we're still stuck in those same problems. And so that's why you can't do it alone, because the fact that you are alone in it is part of the problem itself. And so to experience holistic recovery, real healing that goes beyond just a change of behavior to a change of life, involves stepping out of those places of darkness and secrecy into places of light and community and fellowship where the healing can take place.
Yep.
Nick, Trevor, I love what the two of you are saying. I was speaking to a church in upstate New York for Pure Desire. They had me come back for a week. And matter of fact, over the course of about 4 years, I had 3 trips back to this great church and in upstate New York. And one of the services they had 2 services. One Sunday morning, I was speaking to both services, and I asked them, when God showed up in the cool of the evening, what was Adam and Eve's first response? And almost as a choir, this congregation responded, they hid. But that's not what Adam tells God in Genesis 3. He says, I was afraid.
Yep.
His first response was fear.
Yep.
The literal word in the original language is the fear of exposure. Great beginning definition for shame.
Right.
And so undealt with sin leads to shame, which leads to secrecy, which leads to separation.
Mm-hmm.
It preaches, by the way, in case any of you.
Yeah, no,
a quick sermon.
Yeah, right there. You're into 7 pillars of freedom lesson.
That's right.
Yeah, but the point is this: sexual addiction is a coping strategy. So if it's a coping strategy, you have to ask yourself, what am I coping with? And that begins to unveil what needs to be healed for the addictive behaviors to be dissipated and removed from your life. If we think we just have to stop a bad behavior, we're going to be stagnant and stuck, because it's going to be white knuckling for the rest of your life, and it will never go away because the real issue has not been resolved.